Hello, my name is Ahmed Mustafa, and this is my World War II presentation on Alexandra Richie's book, Warsaw in 44. The Warsaw Uprising was actually one of the main topics in Richie's book. What the uprising was a major World War II operation by the Polish Resistance Army to try and take back Poland from Nazi Germany. The Poles tried to do this by taking advantage of the fact that the Red Army was closing in on the Germans. The significance of the Warsaw Uprising was that it was the largest single military effort taken by any European resistance movement during World War II. The uprising began in early August of 1944. This was strategically timed by the Polish army because of the Red Army closing in on the Germans. The purpose of this mission was to not only try to break away from Nazi Germany, but to also not let the Red Army take control of Poland if they were to get by the Germans. The Polish army made a huge mistake to start off their uprising. The Poles initially intended to begin their uprising near the same time the Soviets entered Warsaw. They planned on both sides being so occupied battling each other that they would have enough strength to liberate themselves. But because of false information, they timed the uprising too early, which proved to be detrimental. For 63 days, the Polish army was able to take over large parts of the city, and were also able to fend off most of the SS's most brutal forces. The Poles fought valiantly and with a lot of heart, but were ultimately defeated by the Germans. One of the main reasons for the Polish army defeat was the lack of support or allies from other countries. Richie describes how Winston Churchill attempted to persuade Joseph Stalin to send air support to the Poles, but was ultimately ignored for his requests. Another issue the Polish army faced was the Soviet army taking advantage of them. Richie explains that the Soviets refused to assist the Poles, but welcomed the assistance of the Polish army in liberating several towns across Warsaw. After taking over the towns, the Soviets then arrested the Polish army leaders and took their soldiers and inducted them into the Soviet army. The Germans proved to be too powerful and were eventually able to get the Polish army to surrender. The aftermath of the uprising proved to be horrific for the city of Warsaw and its civilians. After only 63 days of battle, there were huge amounts of casualties. It was estimated that around 16,000 members of the Polish army were killed, and another 6,000 were badly wounded. On the German side, there were about 8,000 soldiers killed, and another 9,000 were wounded. But the death didn't stop there. Because of fear of another uprising, Hitler commanded that the Polish civilians be expelled from the city of Warsaw. The last thing the Germans wanted at this point was another attack from the Poles that would distract them from their ongoing battle with the Soviet army. Over 700,000 Polish civilians were expelled from Warsaw, 200,000 of which were killed instantly, and the others sent to become labor workers in other camps. The Germans were brutal in the killing of Polish civilians. They would go house to house and gun down family members right in front of each other. They would destroy everything in their path without any remorse. The Germans would go to Polish hospitals, kill all the patients, and then burn down the hospital entirely. Another brutal tactic that was used was to strap Polish women to the front of their tanks as they attacked, forcing the Polish to cease fire as they invaded them. After the evacuation of Polish citizens, the Germans decided to systematically destroy the rest of Warsaw, which had already sustained unrepairable damage from earlier in World War II. The Germans would go building to building, destroying everything they could see. Even German engineers were sent to Warsaw to calculate the most efficient way to destroy the city. The amount of damage that was done to Warsaw was remarkable. By January of 1945, 85% of Warsaw was destroyed. There was an estimated 10,455 buildings destroyed, including 95% of all historical buildings in Warsaw. It was estimated that close to 1 million citizens lost all of their possessions in the destruction of Warsaw. Alexandra Richie's book, Warsaw in 1944, tells the story of a group of desperate citizens trying to take back their country, most of whom were unarmed and untrained in battle, but still were able to put up a brave fight against the powerhouse Germans. Richie also displays the tragedy of war and how being brave wasn't enough to stop the inevitable. One of the main influences for her book Warsaw in 1944 was her husband's father, Władysław Bartoszewski. Bartoszewski was a Polish politician, social activist, journalist, writer, and historian. He was also a former Auschwitz concentration camp prisoner who was a resistance fighter as part of the Polish underground. He was also a participant in the Warsaw Uprising. This gave Alexandra Richie a multitude of resources and first-hand experiences to write about in her book. Warsaw has since been reconstructed and is now a functioning city again. Alexandra Richie currently lives in Warsaw with her husband and 2 children.